whisper a word or two, and it glows right back at you. The smell of coffee and the bread, the news is sad, the children laugh. You were in me, now out of bed, ready for the big bad world. Hello, creatures of the world. Creatures of the world. Creatures of the world. Every morning I wish that we had a sky. I whisper a prayer or two, but they bounce right back off you. The smell of eggs and hot concrete, the papers twist, the children sing, pulling back the pale white sheets. The city wolves show their sharp steel teeth. Hello, creatures of the world. Hello, creatures of the world. Creatures of the world. Every morning I reach up to what was the sky. I whisper a poem or two, but they seem quite lost on you. The smell of sweat and blood from stone. The news is lost, the children gone. Enter the rat race, step out of home. Embrace our new cold, skyless dawn. Hello, creatures of the world. Hello, creatures of the world. Hello, creatures of the world.
Your home away from home. Radio nostalgia from Mars.
Creatures of the world. Now that Attractive takes us back. Stefan Milenkovic, pining for blue skies, fast musing on the games we play. Just a reminder that until further notice, there is a moratorium on all team leaders playing card and board games with their teams, following an incident over a game of Monopoly in Section C. All senior section team leaders will convene for emergency counseling and anger management courses. Until then, there will be no intersectional board game tournaments and no games with groups larger than 4 people at a time per team. In the interim, teams are encouraged to take advantage of the half ration special on OMAS, the delicious and relaxing drink that takes the edge off of everything. Our next caller, Yamil, takes us into her world of food, smells, sensuality, blue skies, and sings us a personal song to remember.
Histoire, mémoire, le bon vieux temps, source originale, fable authentique, espoir, inspiration, drame, musique, radio nostalgie de Mars.
I have nightmares. I'm happy to be alive, but I knew many who deserved to live more than I did. But this is a radio program about nostalgia, not guilt. I've been nostalgic since I was 20, when I left Havana. In Europe, I felt different. Each country has a smell. Mars doesn't. Where I come from, the smell of the ocean, mango, bananas, coconut, mama's food, ropa vieja, de la abuelita, el con gris, la yuca con mojito, the most beautiful sun on Malecón, the smell of my street when the rain falls, all of that make me into the person I am. So when I left, I grew stronger. I experienced the world, but forever stayed incomplete. So now I'm double nostalgic. We were full of life, laughing on warm nights under blue sky, touching each other. The air filled with the smell of sweat from dancing with a Orquesta Aragon playing from an apartment. Now, the only way I can feel this scent is by singing. ¿Cómo fue? No sé decirte cómo fue. No sé explicarme qué pasó, pero de ti me enamoré. Fue una luz que iluminó todo mi ser. Tu risa como manantial llenó mi vida de inquietud. Fueron tus ojos o tu boca, fueron tus manos o tu voz. Fue a lo mejor la impaciencia de tanto esperar tu llegada, mas no sé decirte cómo fue. No sé explicarme qué pasó, pero de ti me enamoré.
Slušajte Radio Nostalgiju sa Marsa.
Thank you, Yamil. What a wonderful story. Reminds us that life is about so much more than just base survival. Well, living in space has always been challenging, and here's a song that pokes a little fun at living in cramped quarters. Needs no introduction. Argue all you want. It's a classic.
Take a moment, relax, and remember with Radio Nostalgia from Mars.
A Russian and an American work together in space. A very different sight from the Cold War arms race. Whether Kubrick or Tarkovsky, Solaris or 2001, Melville or Dostoevsky, Yesenin or Jack London, two astronauts argued about art, values and international relations. Two astronauts argued. Америка убила иракцев, убила Че, Аллегро и Ламунду. Она убила корейцев и вьетнамцев, распространяя демократию. Don't get me started on Stalin and your talent to suffer others. my friend, your history's long. You also inflicted scars. Two astronauts argued about art, values, and international relations. Two astronauts argued. They speak in two tongues, but still for hours they talk. The same oxygen in their lungs, the same thrill on their spacewalk. Я скучаю по утреннему кофе в Москве, сказал российский космонавт. In the summer, said the American astronaut. Я скучаю по жене и дому, сказал российский космонавт. Also miss my wife and just like Charlie the astronaut. Two astronauts argue about art, values, and international relations. Two astronauts как светит солнце, свет Бога, и как прекрасна голубая земля. Говорит Сергей из Роскосмоса. Indeed, search, my friend, with hope, on a run, on a mission for mankind.
Muzika iz starih dobrih dana. Radio nostalgija sa Marsa.
Anna Churchill and arguably the first interplanetary hit, Two Astronauts, an anthem to the Great Evacuation, and certainly one of our most popular requests. Speaking of requests, please follow Habitat protocols for sanitation. No liquids other than bodily in the main bin, including pee. Some of you don't like it, but all water is recycled, so pee into the funnel installed next to your toilet, please. Speaking of pee and poop, we recently welcomed our first official little Martian to the colony, and our next caller, Sophia, tells us what it's like to be a new mother on Mars.
I'm so happy we moved to Mars. It was a project I funded from the very beginning. I knew it had potential and I trusted the amazing team working on it. As angel investors, my husband and I got early placements in the ARC ship. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to further human survival in our solar system. Speaking of the human project, I have some exciting news. Just a week ago, we welcomed our baby boy into the world. Words cannot express how overjoyed we are at welcoming little Maxim. Putting him to bed reminds me of my parents. From our window here in Tesla City, we can see the Earth, tiny enough to fit in Maxim's hand. It pains me that my child might never experience the beauty of my home in the Hamptons. The nature, coastline, the old lighthouse, and the food, the houses of our friends, our evening parties, full of life compared to this barren, rugged terrain. I send my little Martian to sleep with a lullaby my mother sang for me. Thanks to these songs, I'm able to retain, at least on a rudimentary level, my mother tongue. She sang like this. Shushti, shushti, bambusolis, pored moka prozora, noce ticho spuštana gra, za nebeských svodova. Noce ticho spuštana gra, za nebeských svodova.
Radio Nostalgia from Mars.
Thank you, Sophia, for that uplifting news and beautiful song. Life always finds a way. Just as precious as a new life is the water that sustains it. You may have noticed that it doesn't rain here on Mars, so another friendly reminder that showers are strictly limited to 30 seconds each, with no exceptions. Corporate is looking into extending this time frame, but is meeting resistance from Section BC, who want lab rat urine to be excluded from the water recycling program, which would actually reduce allocated shower times to 27 seconds. Want to say in this? Join our sectional weekly meetings and vote while sipping on a relaxing tube of OMAS. Feels good, as it should.
Radio Nostalgia from Mars.
Speed on the Autobahn, like spaceship Earth around the sun. A diver's breath in a deep blue sea, bubbles like your thoughts of me. Make up sex on a summer's day, like an airplane on a runaway. Melts like ice cream in the sun, and doesn't fool. Desperate man taking his chance, quick as the kiss at your first dance. Keep your eyes open and don't you blink, you'll miss the boat before it sinks. Slide passes quickly like buzz like a bomb, like a child in the morning, you'll soon be gone. So hold it close and don't waste your breath, the time will come passes quickly, it flies by. Speed on the Autobahn, like spaceship Earth around the sun. Like a diver's breath in a deep blue sea, passes like your thoughts of me. Make up sex on a summer's day, like an airplane on a runaway. Melts like ice cream in the sun, doesn't fool anyone. Like a desperate man taking his chance, quick as a kiss at your first dance. Keep your eyes open and don't you blink, you'll miss the boat before it sinks. Slide passes quickly like buzz like a bomb, like a child in the morning. quickly.
It flies by. You're home away from home. Radio nostalgia from Mars.
Life passes quickly indeed. Another blast from the past, reminding us to savor each moment as it flies by. Speaking of savoring things, the Health and Wellbeing Department would like us to remind you that the popping and fizzing noise your dried food makes when you're adding water is perfectly normal and does not mean it has gone off or is contaminated. The Health and Wellbeing Department would also like to take this moment to remind you to take your bone density pills twice a week now, as it was discovered the original dose is off by a factor of 2. Right, on with the show. Music and dancing have always been a mainstay of stress relief and letting go. Our next caller, Merva, recalls her teenage clubbing days with vivid memories of awkward first kisses and a life-altering club experience invoking a philosophical epiphany.
Stories, memories, the good old days, original sources, authentic tales, hope, inspiration, drama, radio nostalgia from Mars.
So, when I was a kid in Vienna, in high school, we used to learn all the German poets, like best friends, Goethe and Schiller. But the first poet that actually spoke to me was Heinrich Heine. I knew a couple of Heine's poems by heart that are now buried somewhere deep in my mind. But one passage about burning books stuck with me. Yes, even till today. So, just to fast forward to college, just a couple of years before the Great Catastrophe, I was walking around Berlin with a group of friends coming from a house party. I still remember that apartment smelling of potatoes. Yes, because we always made hummus and drank schnapps before heading out. Yeah. And after that, I remember passing by Alexanderplatz on that very, very hot night. And next to me was a guy I liked. We kissed before, but I can't say I really remember that. Probably from all the drinking, or maybe he was just a bad kisser. But I can still feel this sticky, sweaty, and very ambivalent feeling of us holding hands. Yeah, anyways, we popped some pills and entered our techno church that, well, now when I think back, I visited more often than my college. And I remember the beat in my chest and all these young bodies moving in this industrial space. I used to love dancing and counting beats in techno songs, but one song was very strange. It just went repetition, 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 and then this female vocal would creep out of nowhere. And then suddenly I felt very dizzy, so I sat on the ground and held my knees closely to my chest. It was some sort of like protective instinct. I was like an animal, and I felt cold sweat dripping down my neck. Ugh. And I'm sure my guy thought I was completely crazy. And then out of nowhere, the Heine lines clearly came to me. I sat there motionless, surrounded by the ugly, hypnotic, delirious atmosphere. And no effort to recall Heine's lines. They were just there, planted in my head. Wilde, düstere Zeiten dröhnen heran und der Prophet, der eine neue Apokalypse schreiben wollte, musste ganz neue Bestien erfinden. Und zwar so erschreckliche, dass die älteren johannischen Tiersymbole dagegen nur sanfte Täubchen und Amoretten wären. Die Götter verhüllen ihr Antlitz aus Mitleid mit den Menschenkindern, ihren langjährigen Pfleglingen und vielleicht zugleich auch aus Besorgnis über das eigene Schicksal. And yeah, 2 years later, I ended up here, on Mars.
That does bring back memories of university days and sweaty club nights. Earthly hedonism at its finest. For the record, corporate does not endorse or advocate the use of psychedelic drugs, and reminds you, dear listeners, that Class A drugs are just as illegal here on Mars as they were on Earth. Okay, disclaimer out of the way, we actually have a surprise for Mirva. We tracked down that weird song in her head and dug it out of the archives for all to hear. Grab a tube of OMAS and enjoy the ride while sipping on pure calm.
The deepest tunes, the warmest memories. Radio nostalgia from Mars.
Repetition, 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 disruption. Procrastinate, hibernate, isolate, masturbate, duplicate, fabricate, formulate, negotiate, calculate, allocate, accumulate, assimilate, eliminate, alleviate, mediate, dictate, subjugate, interrogate, procrastinate, hibernate, isolate, masturbate, duplicate, fabricate, formulate, negotiate, calculate, allocate, accumulate, assimilate, eliminate, alleviate, mediate, dictate, Russian.
You're listening to Radio Nostalgia from Mars.
Well, what can I say? No wonder that song got into her head. But with a little help from some friends, she pulled through. Another thing that can get into your head is living conditions here on Mars. Life up here on Mars can get a bit overwhelming at times, so along with a soothing OMAS drink, no stress, no fuss, it bears mentioning that wellness counseling is mandatory for all team members, regardless of rank or tenure. The wellness sessions are completely confidential and anonymous, but do remember that all conversations are monitored and recorded for security reasons, and you must have your ID badge and sectional access pass visible at all times. Okay, time for another story. Our last caller for Tussaul's show is Francesco, who tells a haunting tale of his last days on Earth as the great catastrophe kicked into high gear.
Stories, memories, the good old days, original sources, authentic tales, hope, inspiration, drama, radio nostalgia from Mars.
It was an extremely humid summer. My parents would not let me out because of the floods in Italy. My father went outside. He was working in the greenhouse on the vineyard, and my mother was a doctor. She read Italian fairy tales to me. I was very small, but I remember many days when our neighbors would gather at our house and make plans. It rained heavily at night. They would only say to me, "Powerful people want to take my great-great-grandfather's land." But one image stuck in my memory. It was daybreak. I woke up and I could faintly hear in the dark, "O Gorizia, tu sei maledetta." Only later I understood the history behind this song. Outside I saw men and women, my father and mother, rifles in their hands. My father was crying and singing. I was at the door of the house. My mother turned and smiled at me, but it was a mysterious, confident smile. Cara moglie che tu non mi senti, raccomando ai compagni vicini di tenermi da conto i bambini, che io muoio col suo nome nel cuore. Of course, I had no idea where they were buried. Traditori, signori ufficiali, che la guerra l'avete voluta, scannatori di carne venduta e rovina della gioventù. 12 years later, the Mars mission. In a way, the people who killed my parents found me in Italy and recruited me. Saved me, you can say. It is ironic now. My parents fought for freedom. I cannot say I'm free here on Mars. They took my semen this morning for the population increase program. Here, on Mars, Often in the middle of the night, I hear my parents sing. O Gorizia, tu sei maledetta per ogni cuore che sente coscienza. Dolorosa ci fu la partenza e il ritorno per molti non fu. O Gorizia, tu sei maledetta per ogni cuore che sente coscienza. Dolorosa ci fu la partenza e il ritorno per molti non fu.